Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George-affleck.
And it's time for...
So help me God, UnSpun.
Oh my God, I watched...
I don't know what the whole,
Hand on the book.
Hand on Bible.
Hand in the... Oh my goodness. Did you watch all of it? I watched all of it, George.
I did. I mean, it's not something I've ever really watched before. And actually, we even kept Quinn, my 12-year-old, home, took him late to school because we kind of said, you should watch this. This is kind of an important, big deal. And he's not a big Trump supporter. He's only 12. But and I think we've talked about this before, that he knows more about American politics, like many kids these days, than they do about, Canadian politics. But, so we thought we wanted to watch that because it's about hope, right? I mean, I think whether you like Trump or not, it's been a bit chaotic down there. And people wanted to stop. And I think that was an important message he needed to get through yesterday.
I agree. That on edge piece, right? That because every day we're like, it can't get worse. It can't get more stressful. It can't go lower. And then every day it felt like it did. And then today is the first day. It's like, oh, yeah, that part's gone. And that we can talk, I mean, people are going to study the Donald Trump, the world's longest single presidential term, felt longer than 4 years for so many. And yet
COVID
at the same time,
there, and you got the worst 4 years of our lives.
For me though, in watching, like, I was really emotional watching Kamala Harris be inaugurated as the Vice President of the United States. I mean, there's an entire generation. It still gives me goosebumps even to say it out loud. And I've been watching it and following it and following her, and all the way along from I was that kid to when she was a guest on Colbert or Kimmel or whatever, and how her persona, she's so consistent. And then to see her and hear her and how she speaks, like there's so much to this moment in time that has nothing to do with Donald Trump. It has nothing really to do even with Joe Biden. I mean, he knows where he's going when he walks into the White House. He used to be over there in the West Wing or over in the other residence, right?
I was thinking that too. He knows his way around, literally.
Clearly. And it's like, hey, Joe, you're in my office. Kamala's office is beautiful, but there was so much about it that I loved in the inauguration. Obviously, we can talk about the pomp and circumstance, but one thing that I loved when we talk about, I mean, men and women love fashion, but women always love to look at women and go, oh my God, did you see Michelle Obama? She looked like a superhero. And what Kamala was wearing, and the purples, and everybody seemed to be wearing purple. Well, purple is red and blue.
Yes, I was a part of the NPA logo. that was
really?
Actually the concept. The new logo is the purple, which is a blending of red and blue and left and right and all those things.
Isn't that odd? Is the new NPA for 2022 going to be bright red?
We'll get to that, I'm thinking.
Okay. Sorry.
I just want to say, though, one of the things when we talk about on our show, and something that I really was an advocate for when I was in office and still am, and having been a former journalist, and is truth and transparency in government. And I thought that the new communications director, or the press secretary.
She is.
And that was one, I watched that whole thing. So I was curious to watch a press conference.
It's going to be every day, George.
Yeah. And
every day.
And she said those words, and I tweeted that out, truth and transparency. These are things that I think are really important, and her respect. And she said, we're not always going to get along with the media, but it's important that, that we get this, the truth out. And sometimes I may not agree with your take on it, but that's the way it goes. And I think that that's really important. And I always like this confusion, and there's actually an op-ed right now from Harvey Oberfeld. He's written on his blog about about the province and journalism and transparency and pushing harder on government. And it's like, I think that there's this, there must be and obviously when I was in council, I felt like there was all obstruction and opaqueness of City Hall that was really frustrating for people and for journalists. And I think it just works against you. And I think to be open and transparent and honest and truthful and give the media what they want, in a timeline that's reasonable, you end up solving a lot of your problems in government, and you end up stopping these conspiracy theories and all the fake news. If you focus on truth, I truly believe that truth will win. I know it's corny, but I think it's important. And I think governments are so afraid now that they're stopping themselves from just telling the media everything. And so therefore these conspiracy theories just build up, and it's brutal.
The war rooms are letting them down because they're like, how do we manage the message?
Yeah.
How about you just say what's happening, right? And then say what you're going to do about it. And then, because that's one thing I got to say, George, for those who don't necessarily know our history, is when I first got to know you, it was totally because you were an accessible, honest, forthright, communicative. Like, you answered the phone and said, yes, I will come on with you every time I called you. And then people were like, oh, you must be NPA. I'm like, no. Well, you always talk to George-affleck. Because he's the one who comes on with me to talk about what's going on in City Hall. Everybody else is so afraid that they're going to paint themselves into a corner because they're supposed to try and keep something secret, which is why there's a lack of public trust, right? So, George, I think that you, and I'm not blowing smoke, and this is nothing we've talked about prior to, but it's one of the reasons why I'm so glad I get to do UnSpun with you, is because you are fearless in giving your perspective and your opinion. You will be cautious about some things, but when you are cautious about things, you're not going to try and go, oh, look, sparkly thing. You're going to say, listen, I can't talk to you about that right now, but I will as soon as I can. Yeah. Because there's some things that are in camera, or there's some things that are in the work, or the paperwork hasn't been signed yet, or, there are those things.
One of those, I had this kind of feeling when there was policy, and I think it's a good policy for government in this province. And is Bob Mackin? What's Bob Mackin going to do about this? And I don't know if anybody knows Bob Mackin. He is a tenacious journalist, freelance journalist, who loves doing FOIs. That's freedom of information. Going to city halls and the provincial government and getting this information. And he sometimes pushes the boundaries for sure from his reporting. But it's like, if Bob stops complaining about not being able to access things, okay, maybe we're giving him enough. It's one of those things, like, it's maybe not possible to really satisfy Bob Mackin. I don't know, but it's a question of the perception. Okay, he wants this information, and he's not getting it. Why is that? What can we do that can improve that? Because it'll improve it for all journalists, I think.
And the people that read him trust him because he works that hard digging in the corners, right? It's not just like random, here's my opinion on this, that I looked around the room and decided on a couple things. He actually,
he digs deep.
He's got his thing.
And he's not afraid to attack, politicians. And the thing is that, again, going back to that press conference yesterday, there's a problem. If journalists generally they won't approach politicians first necessarily on their stories. They'll go behind the scenes. They'll try to figure out through staff, through whatever, through the process that exists to find out what's the story here, whatever that might be.
Right.
And they generally go to the politicians either to get the clip, or if they feel like they're getting, having roadblocks put up in front of them. Or they just need to have the other side or whatever. But generally, if and this is kind of that press conference, she's saying, I will give you what you need, which will take the heat off the president to a certain degree, at least for a while.
Well, because they won't be looking for the gotcha, right? Like, the gotcha is where you go when you get nothing. I'm going to go for the gotcha. Yeah. I found it amazing. And I also loved the quieting nature of it. At one point I turned to Brian, my partner Brian, and I, because we literally had it on from 7 a.m. until late last night, watching Tom Hanks freeze his butt off. It's like, get that man a coat. It was like, it was almost extra special because there was no, massive crowd. It felt more personal. It was weird in the COVID way that, masks everywhere and all that, because it's harder to hear people, I find, if you can't watch their mouths. But overall, and John Legend, can we just talk about John Legend for a second?
Well, were you watching Chrissy Teigen, his wife's?
I follow her on Twitter. I love her. She's the 11th person for POTUS to follow.
I saw that only because she begged.
And that she's Chrissy Teigen and she's awesome.
That's right.
By the way,
also follow me because, as you pointed out, I found out that I didn't even know Barack Obama follows me, which was news to me. I think you pointed that out, didn't you?
I did. I did. I'm like, what? Well, you are George Affleck on Twitter, at George_Affleck on Twitter. I'm at Jody Vance, Jody with a Y. I've had to hit mute on it. People want to fight about indoor and outdoor cats. Or really? That's what we're doing now? All I did was my cat was outdoor, moved 18 times and lived to be almost 22. And people are like, you evil. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm not fighting about cats.
I must say though, yesterday was pretty fun with the memes and the stuff on Twitter and
Oh, with
all
Bernie?
of with Bernie and some of the other ones. Some of them were fake, but it was still a pretty fun day
It was pretty
on
funny.
social media. I thought there's some
Yeah.
really the memes of Bernie. You see the one where he's with Eisen, or is it with the famous shot of Churchill and
I didn't see
during the
that
Second
one.
World War, and they've added it's Churchill and the leader of the Russia, I totally remember Stalin and
Yeah.
anyways, it was and Roosevelt, and so they put Bernie in that shot on the left side with his gloves and his classic.
I like the one where Demi Moore and Ghost doing the pottery, and all of a sudden her hands have the gloves on. That one was pretty funny too. Okay, let's get back to what's happening here in BC. There's a big press conference. We, of course, record UnSpun podcast on a Thursday. Our Friday COVID-19 update, live update, has been canceled. That will be a release only because there is going to be a vaccine information presser about the mass rollout of vaccinations. It will feature, of course, Dr. Bonnie Henry, the provincial health officer, Health Minister Adrian Dix, Premier John-Horgan, and others. Expectations, concerns, thoughts?
Vaccine rollout or lack thereof. I mean, I'm worried based on what we're seeing federally from Trudeau and his spinning of this issue, and Pfizer's tough stance on, or they're saying that they haven't got any, there's an interesting timing situation with Pfizer saying they can't deliver. And, oh, by the way, can you in your budget give us a tax break?
Yeah, I don't like that.
You don't like that.
I'm Team Pfizer too. I'm one shot in. Come on, guys.
Yeah,
I'm wearing the T-shirt here. What? Yeah.
So I'm hoping it's not an announcement about we're going to slow down. I mean,
I don't think so. I think it's an announcement. I'm going to say that it's going to ramp up, and they're going to say how. And I think that perhaps the AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson's Janssen, which makes it all very confusing, are also on the precipice. According to some scientists that I spoke with in the last week, while filling in for Charles Adler, there's like 6 or 7 vaccines that are viable and in the latter stages of the
and that doesn't even include the ones
testing.
in Russia and China, and they have ones too, right? That are
but there's 2 that are the recumbent. Which is a protein base that
and
is
you
like
lie back and
that's right. It's like that. But it's the those ones basically just need regular refrigeration, and that's what changes everything, because Pfizer is like super ultra cold. Moderna is freezer, like ice cream truck chain, and then these other ones coming in are like any other drug. Ship them
like a regular vaccine for the flu.
Exactly, which we're set up for. So I think, and I know nothing, but my unspun spidey sense, and in speaking with the people that I figure know more than I do on this, are kind of coming at it as I think it's a way of putting to bed some of the really loud questions of when is it my turn, right? How old? When's happening? How am I going to find out? I can't tell you how many. My column from last week where I got the call has sparked so many questions from lovely people who are like, I'm so glad for you, but when is it happening for me?
Yeah.
And I'd say, okay, well, how old are you? Where do you live? What's going to happen? Are they going to call me? Yes, they're going to call you. You will be called. They know how to find you.
Inefficient to me, but in the UK they've got an app you can go on there and that gives you an estimate of where you are, and it's a bit depressing because if you do it, you're like, you are 17 millionth in line. It's like, but it makes you feel okay, So
we're gonna get
just
there.
Seems like you got Biden his 100 days and 100 million plan, and you've got his 200-page tome that he dropped on us today. So here's our plan. I just feel like, what is the plan? Where's the federal? He kind of hear it here and there, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, something provincially. I just don't feel like what's the plan? Where are the trucks rolling in? Where are the pharmacies? And what is the plan? I just feel like there's no transparency on this, and I think that's what they're doing
tomorrow. I feel like that's what they're going to do tomorrow. To exactly your point right there, because across the country, it has been noisy in weird ways and more organized, I believe, here. I think that the even in the last press briefing that I listened to, the Q&A, it was, by the end of March, everyone over the age of 80, period, in British Columbia will be vaccinated. Everybody. So when you start thinking about, okay, so by the first part of June, everybody over the age of 70 will be vaccinated. These are the things they're going to start saying. And we start going, okay, well, it's, it's the 21st of January. So we got, 10 days left in this month. And then we're like, okay, so 40 days from now, so 70 days from now, the most vulnerable portion of the population will be protected. I mean, when we start looking at it in terms of that, because it's really the amping up of the headlines, I totally get it. But we could be without a vaccine. Imagine that. Oh, nice product placement there for your listening pleasure. You're going Tim Hortons, and I apparently have the Starbucks or something or other. Yeah, I got Starbucks.
This is my new cleanse, my coffee cleanse.
How's your dry January going, by the way?
Well, it's not dry January. It's the fast daytime fast thing, right? Or you intermittent fasting thing.
So that's black coffee. That's black coffee. Ew, gross. Okay, let's talk about the polls around vaccines, though. I think you can. Yes.
Well, and that's the thing. Okay, so tomorrow we'll see what that is. But clearly, if this election, the NDP called it right. Sadly, in one way, because obviously I ran, I lost. But that's fine. Okay about it.
In a while.
People, why don't you love me? It's that the fact that the NDP called that election in the fall is proving their point, because the polling that came out today is showing like a huge decline in their popularity and in frustration in the province related to the vaccination program, and so you could see that coming like a mile away. The heightened love of the province and Dr. Bonnie Henry at its 110% approval rating or whatever that was.
Well, she's not a politician, just to be
clear.
No,
I know, but there's the process. The province was like the shining light. Oh my good, and now they're sort of, and she's even getting some heat. There's some heat.
Oh, for sure. Getting some. Woman has been getting death threats, dude. She's not been held on a pedestal.
No. Well, okay. I think by the media quite a bit, but I think she's doing a good job. But I think you still, from a journalistic point of view, there could have been some tougher questions to ask way back. Anyways, I'm not going to get into that.
Get into the poll.
Yeah, the poll and party politics and all that stuff. So they held an election. The Liberals lost badly to them, and the Greens didn't go anywhere. It's proving their point. This poll that came out that was a good decision. And now we're finding out the Liberals that Andrew Wilkinson hasn't stepped down. I'm a bit confused by this one, actually. It was news to me.
I don't know what's going on there. What's going on there? Like,
well,
if he doesn't step down, does he still get paid? Like, is this about money?
No. I think it's just party politics and governance and how your bylaws work. There's a whole process to that.
Right.
That most of it's not particularly transparent, but often within those they have their systems for how they choose their leaders, or every party has their own system. And it's decided in AGMs, and they're nonprofits, right? They run like any nonprofit. They just happen to be a political party, and so it turns out, that Shirley Bond is the leader in a legislature, but Wilkinson is the leader of the party. So okay, and until there's a process chosen and figured out, and they just announced this committee, the BC Liberals, on who's all. I think Colin Hanson is co-chair. Colin Hanson, former minister, former MLA from Andrew Wilkinson's riding, is on this committee, and they'll decide the process, I guess, and how this whole leadership race will go. And we, of course, see Kevin Falcon throwing some balls in the air, or was it a shot across
throwing
the bow,
up a flare?
Whatever.
Yeah,
up a flare.
So, running the flag up the flagpole. What's the term? Running up the flag and see if it flies. Yeah.
Yeah. So his op-ed, which was almost like I wrote it. It was very similar to my opinions on how Vancouver should deal with the whole crisis on homelessness and drugs. And anyway,
it did sound a lot like you, George. I had
It did. I was like, hey, wait a minute.
Just a second here.
You've been looking at my private emails. Actually, most of that's public, that I've been saying very clearly the four pillars and all that stuff. So party politics, I don't know, and whatever. They're going for a new leader. Whether Wilkinson stays on in that riding and steps down, and all these rumored people running for the leadership of the Liberals. A lot of I think the people that you'll see popping up it's a play to raise their profile, especially if they're newbies, to get that riding as their chosen riding. Because if he steps down before the next election, a guaranteed seat for any Liberal, no matter where you're from. So it'll be interesting to see what happens after the leadership of the BC Liberals.
Can I get to the guaranteed? Because this is jumping topics a little bit, but when you're talking about the inner workings and how people are appointed or elected or what have you,
Yeah.
the big news, like Governor General Julie
Oh yeah,
Payette
that just came out.
resigning today.
That was weird. Like, wow, that's huge. I mean, that's like so embarrassing. It's like
So
the Queen's
embarrassing.
representative, supposed to be the most even keeled, almost bland position, ceremonial. This person
Is a bully.
is turns out to be a bully, and we've seen a lot of those
Toxic.
in Vancouver, as your column this week
Yeah. We'll get to that.
touched on.
No more bullies, man.
No more
We're done
bullies.
here.
So
it's a good example of that, though. I mean, the fact that earlier today, prior to the announcement coming down, or the news coming to light that she would be resigning, it was like, well, if she doesn't, then the prime minister needs to go to the Queen and say,
I know,
my bad, right?
Could you imagine how?
Yeah. But can we talk about vetting
Majesty?
people? Like, how did he not ask? How did somebody not ask what she was like to work with prior to? Are we that like, oh, she was an astronaut and she's a woman, boom, done. It's like, hold on a second.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I'm all
on
for
the
women
books.
getting opportunities.
Yeah, on the books, very impressive. You know, she was an astronaut, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
Not a lot of those around, and not a lot of women doing that. And so, you know, on paper, wow, impressive. But you know, in that job, like the lieutenant governor in BC, this all happens in the back room. It's a decision by the party in power. Quite often it's friends or whatever. But usually you try to choose somebody who's not going to create a headache for you. Because imagine if she's a bully and that's what they're saying and all the stuff within how she manages her staff. But imagine if the person they choose was a nut bar and that position actually has a lot of power. They can stop pretty much anything if they want. And say, no, I'm not going to give my little stamp on that new law.
Now imagine if that nut bar type of person was a homophobic, transphobic, misogynistic, bigot, slur-filled nightmare that actually impacts children. You know, that's what my column is. Too much of a perfect segue from one to the next. Like, I have been in the media for the entire span of Barry Neufeld's tenure as a school trustee. And if ever there was an example of somebody who should be removed, it's him. And that's not to say there aren't other examples, but my middle this week is about finding a way when people say there's just no mechanism to get rid of him. It's like, and we need to change that.
Though, because you have to, as your column points out, and I was even like the whole 15-year thing, I was like, what? Yeah. I guess every school board is slightly different and they can choose that process.
No, I'll give you this update. Because it is, I give props to Scott McKenzie, actually, from the Ministry of Education, read my column, or somebody did, in Jennifer White's, Minister Whiteside's office, called me directly and just said, hey, that 15-year thing. And I'm like, well, that's what it says. And I sent him links, like on actual school board links of his first term that went from 1993 to 2008. How is that interpreted? Right. And he's like, okay. And then that was mirrored in other, from Wikipedia to whatever, other columns and articles and whatever. It was just the first time it was like, no, that's not a typo. Because I did actually resource it 4 different spots. And he's like, yeah, it's a misrepresentation. He was actually reelected 5 times over that. It was 3-year terms at the time.
Oh, okay.
Now it's 4-year terms.
And then it was 3, and it was 4.
Right.
Got it.
And I'm like, okay, so that's reflected in the column now. I've corrected that. But what's lovely about the communication that I got from and Scott was so funny. He's like, back in 1993, I was 3 then.
Okay.
I'm like, okay, thanks.
That's not information we need.
God bless.
It's depressing.
It's so funny. I know. I'm like, I'm old. But the education minister, Minister Whiteside, created a statement that you can find up at the Orca on my column, and I put it out on Twitter as well. Her response is very similar to the way I feel as just a layperson looking at this with a child in the public school system. And there are others that are like, well, he was elected in by people who are like-minded. And I'm like, well, that's fine. But there should be a code of conduct that at a certain level, like there is, but the rule is you have to fire the whole school board, which happened in Vancouver a couple of times. And even if it is, in the case of Vancouver, 1 or 2 people that are the true bullies, as was the case in Vancouver, and reported and
easily accessible if anybody wants to see what really happened in Vancouver.
I'd
Go
like to
read
see
the
what really
report
happened. Yeah.
and ask the people who were those people identified that were the bullies, why they bullied, and how they may or may not have a current public profile. I think that it's bizarre that they have to fire the entire school board, not
Me
just one or
too.
two of these people. Like you, the school board should be able to fire the school board. The rest of the school board say you're a jerk, get out of here.
Yeah, you're
It's
toxic
so
to this
strange.
work environment and to the people you're
Yeah,
here to serve, who are youth and children.
yeah.
I'm just, beside myself on the fact that,
It's a sick
and for
irony.
me, it's not so much about the individual here, because the individual is just a symptom of the problem, and the problem
Yeah,
is that they feel untouchable. You know what? If I go down, you're all going down. It's like, no, there should be an ombudsperson or some sort of tribunal of private and elected officials that come together and look at what is happening. It's kind of like all that we've watched in impeaching presidents. Like, there just needs to be that transparency, to look at what this one school trustee has openly said and done, and unapologetically so, to huge vulnerable swaths of society and children. It's just, yeah, read my column. I'm over my head. I'm over my head, but I'm mad about it. But Minister Whiteside is definitely on side with trying to figure out a way to fix this. And don't come at me with it's a slippery slope, because the slippery slope is we're halfway down a double black diamond, people. The
no, I
bullies are getting away
mean,
with it.
why is it different for school board than it is for council? We have currently a councillor in Vancouver who may be booted off of council. You don't have to fire the whole council because this guy didn't follow the regulations that
Conflict of interest.
the conflict of interest, and he's got a perceived conflict. He's going through a legal battle right now. We don't know what the results will be, and maybe he'll be cleared, but it doesn't mean the whole council gets the can. There is a process for this individual that why can't we do that at school board? Why can't they go through a similar process at these school boards? And this is not, yeah, you're right. This isn't about cancel culture or anything.
No.
I suppose there could be, boards that will take advantage of this process potentially, but I think the electorate, as we live in a democracy, will see that and make their decision accordingly, as they did in Vancouver. They ended up, you saw what happened in the next election. Pretty much everybody got the boot that ran again. That was a part of that problem. So it's really,
it left our school board, because I'm in Vancouver, but because it left our school board incredibly vulnerable at a time where we needed the leadership. The archaic cobweb filled corners of the processes that have been in place for decades and decades need to be cleared out. They do. Well, the fact that the rebuilds on the schools, the seismic upgrades, the budget doesn't include covered outdoor space. Come on, what is that?
Just that they're so behind. The only reason they're so behind, they can't point the finger at the province. It's only their fault.
But covered outdoor space, we're going to politicize in the rainiest place on the freaking planet that kids are going to stand out, mandatory outdoors, in a place that rains 300 days a year, no covered area. Clearly, people making those decisions
are not hot dogs at your kids' baseball game.
Don't even get me started about the hot dogs. Hey, they have hot dogs there now. There's just no baseball there right now.
I'm calling the cops.
Can I get one more thing in? I've only got like 30 seconds. I'm not going to get a chance. I'm going to get your opinion on party politics and the NPA going far right and all that.
I gave you an in earlier. You didn't go for it.
I know. But it's not important enough because there's other stuff that's more important. And I want to talk about the one thing I just signed. This is an add-on for me. There's a want for paid sick leave for those who don't have it. For 10 days, if you get a positive COVID-19 test, there are so many people, so many essential workers living paycheck to paycheck who do not have paid sick leave from their employers, and they're going to work sick. We need that to change. So I just want to cap off with that. Sorry, I just threw that at you. Okay, I'll go back.
Sounds like a plan. On that note, bye.
Bye, George.
See you next week.